Welcome to the Tony Frida Show. Tony Frida here, and we have a very special treat today. Author and legend CJ Hopkins. Hi, CJ.
How you doing?
Good. So every age seems to magically produce an artist whose particular experience and artistic sensibilities perfectly calibrated to the particular pathology of that age. And I think CJ was the man for the moment to chronicle the COVID era. And I think you can draw a line from Orwell to PK Dick to CJ. He's just the perfect voice to express in his brilliant satirical fashion the madness that COVID brought out on a global scale. And I think these are historical documents that someday, hopefully, humanity will look back and say, what the hell were we doing? And he expressed it just artistically and satirically and brilliantly captured that madness in his own Hopkins-esque style that is, to me, again, these are important documents that he's created. And it came at a great personal cost to CJ to speak truth to power. And he's still being persecuted for doing nothing but expressing himself as an artist. And it's a crime against him and against humanity, the way he's been treated. But just personally, I lost a lot of heroes during the COVID era. I mean, there was a lot of artists who I just assumed were skeptical of authority and who had their own personal, individual ideas that would transcend the herd mentality and the hive mind and the authoritative scriptures that were demanded of them to acquiesce to. But I was wrong. I mean, people that I admired were just became like capos in Nazi Germany, and they had this weird and really terrifying combination of this obsequious bowing to authority combined with hostility and animosity towards any of us who questioned any part of these absurd and contradictory and completely untrue dictates that were being demanded of us at the time. And I felt like, and I'm sure CJ did too, almost sometimes like I was the only sane person in a madhouse because it was everywhere you went. So I was crestfallen. It broke my heart to see my heroes become these cowardly sycophants to people like Fauci. They were painting portraits of Fauci as this godlike creature and as this, fatherly figure that was going to save us all, because they became this dynamic where he was the father figure and Bill Gates was the father figure, and they were going to save us, but we had to assume the role, the posture of a child. And our daddy Fauci was going to save us. And it made me want to throw up. I was painting Fauci as a demon, which I believe he is, and they didn't like that. So I found myself like a patriot without a country. And thank God, when I lost my old heroes, I was able to find new heroes. And this man, CJ Hopkins, is at the top of the list because he spoke truth to power when there was an enormous cost associated with it. And like me, CJ, I think, doesn't like people telling him what to do. We got a little problem with authority. And I think that's the American spirit, that we don't like people telling us what to do. We don't like people with crowns telling us what to do. We don't like people, with jackboots telling us what to do. And it was like the whole country became filled with these capos who loved this sort of reflected power of the state and the authority of state that they felt was invested in them to torment us, anybody who questioned any part of this thing. And it was disgraceful to find yourself in this nightmare where I was just asking questions like, wait, this doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense, and this is obviously completely untrue. And they would just look at you with this, I call it this COVID stare, like, what do you mean? Like, of course it's true. It's like, don't you listen to the news? People would say to me. I'm like, yeah, I do listen to the news. That's the problem. I know that they're lying. Um, but I look at everything now through this idea of the inversion principle or the law of reversal, where the news isn't just lying to us. They're telling us the opposite of the truth. And once you look at it through that lens, then everything makes sense. Because I was confused before that, like, well, this doesn't make any sense. But once you see that's their goal, just like the Satanists turn the cross upside down, it's an inversion of what's good and what's holy and what's true and what's right. And if you use the inversion principle, you can make a lot of sense of the world we're in. But let me just give you a little background on CJ. This is from Wikipedia, so it may or may not be true. CJ has written 6 plays, 4 essay collections, and 1 novel, Zone 23, which is a dystopian novel where they pathologize dissent. And I think we're living in one of CJ's novels sometimes. After studying film and communication at University of Miami, Hopkins realized he did not want to move to Hollywood or deal with the commercial film business. His self-described problem with authority made the rigid hierarchical nature of film production unappealing. He then lived and worked in San Francisco and New York before moving to Germany in 2004. In 2022, he tweeted pictures of the cover. This is the evil cover that CJ and I co-designed. And that was the start of his protracted battle with the German authorities. The cover includes a swastika. I don't know if you're allowed to even say that word, but I tried to make it as faint as possible. If I made it any more faint, you couldn't see. So it was this balance between, it has to be legible, but at the same time, like I wanted to sort of get it past the censor bots, but I failed miserably, and CJ paid an enormous price for it because they didn't like this. And you were charged, according to German law, regarding propaganda, the contents of which are intended to further the aims of a former National Socialist organization, also known as the Nazis. Now, you were acquitted of the first charge in Berlin District Court in January 2024. The prosecution appealed the acquittal, and you were convicted by the Berlin Superior Court in September 2024. In November 2025, Berlin police raided Hopkins' home, confiscated his computer, interrogated him and his wife, and you were indicted on new charges for publishing, distributing, promoting the book. And I know it's gotten even more complicated and Kafkaesque, which is a word that people throw around, but CJ's living in a Kafkaesque nightmare. Legitimately, it's not hyperbole to say that in his case. So CJ, I just kind of set the table there. I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but thank you so much for your time and for your enormous sacrifices you've made CJ's on the front lines of the fight for free expression and human liberty. And I salute you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to talk to you, Anthony. I've got to just correct you a little bit because you didn't fail. Your design is perfect and beautiful. It's exactly what we were going for. The whole idea is that you see that medical looking mask that everybody recognizes from the COVID era, and then there's something behind it. What is that? And then you peer, and there it is, the dreaded swastika. And I think you executed it perfectly. Der Spiegel magazine in Germany, the big internationally known magazine, they liked that concept so much. They right around the time that my acquittal was being overturned in Superior Court, they published an edition of their magazine which was using the same concept. On the cover, big fat swastika on the cover, but they covered it with the German flag. And I think they asked the question, is it happening again? They were of course comparing the Alternative for Germany party, the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. They were comparing this party to the Nazis, which of course is no problem in Germany. The police are not raiding the offices of Der Spiegel or indicting the publisher of Der Spiegel. You can compare the AfD or the Russians or any number of people to the Nazis, and that's all fine. But apparently, you don't compare the German authorities to the Nazis. This doesn't work. Then you end up being dragged into court numerous times, like I have
Yeah,
been.
well, to me, that's absolute proof that this is selective prosecution. This is political persecution. It has nothing to do with the laws regarding the symbol in Germany. As far as I understand, you're protected under satire, and the bottom line is you're completely innocent of the charges, and they know you're completely innocent of the charges, yet they choose to persecute you and prosecute you and threaten your freedom and threaten you with onerous fines and put you through hell for 4 years of your life. I can't imagine the toll it's taken on you personally and physically and spiritually, and just consuming your times. I mean, you just want to create your art and live your life, and they've denied you the right to just live your life in peace. And this is where it comes back to, we don't like authority, and this is one of the reasons we don't like you. Just leave us alone, let us live in peace, and try to apply the laws equally and fairly, which is, isn't that kind of the whole idea of the justice system?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the most stressful part about the whole thing is you described, I think you gave a really good summary of everything that's happened. I was originally charged for 2 tweets. I put some tweets out back in 2022, right after the book had come out, and I was promoting the book, but also I was criticizing the mask mandates in Germany. Germany was considering finally ending the mask mandates, and so many people were up in arms. The Germans were freaking out, saying, "No, we can't, end the mask mandates. We have to wear masks, all the time." And so I put these 2 sarcastic tweets out, one of them aimed at the health minister, Karl Lauterbach, and I included the cover art of the book in those tweets. That's what I was originally indicted for and dragged into court for. And as you said, acquitted originally, which is an important point. A lot of Americans don't really understand the German law. They think that there is this blanket ban on swastikas. And there isn't. There is a ban on Nazi symbols. It is aimed at stopping neo-Nazis and people who are promoting Nazism from displaying those symbols. Written into the law are a number of exceptions, for art, as you mentioned, and history, and the most important one for me was if you're using Nazi symbols to protest or oppose anti-constitutional activity. Basically, if you're using it to do what I did, compare
Yeah.
somebody to Nazis, it's also what Der Spiegel did. And any number of people have done. This is one of the exceptions that's written into the law, so there's not a blanket ban. The judge in my first case, she understood the law. She didn't like me. She called me names, but she followed the law and acquitted me. And then my acquittal was overturned by the Superior Court because the prosecutor wasn't happy with it. It's a long way of getting back to saying I think the thing that has been or has become the most stressful about this is that at this point, the German authorities and the courts have demonstrated that the rule of law and the democratic rights that are written into the German Constitution. Okay, it's not the First Amendment; it's not as strong as the First Amendment in the United States, but it's written right into the German Constitution. Basic democratic rights, no censorship, freedom of speech, all of this. The German authorities and the courts have demonstrated at this point that this means absolutely nothing to them. The rule of law means nothing to them. The Constitution means nothing to them. And they will twist and pervert the law and just, trump up charges, whatever they have to, in order to punish dissidents, people that are criticizing the government. And so that leaves me and a lot of other people. I mean, my case is just one example of this, but it leaves me with no, there's nothing to rely on. I had a meeting with my lawyer. We sat down. He said, "Look, normally, if I were advising a client, I would say, okay, this is what the laws are, and so this is what we have, to base our defense on." But at this point in Germany, the laws mean nothing. So we have no idea what they're going to do, how they're going to respond. They could send the police to raid my home again tomorrow on some made up charges. The uncertainty, the insecurity, faced with this, with the unpredictability of what the tyrant is going to do, that's probably the most stressful for me.
Yeah, but it's an obvious perversion of the law I mean, it's almost childish the way they're lashing out at you, and it's so naked and transparent, yet they have this power to do it. So they're just saying, they're flexing their muscles, saying, we can do it, so we will. We can make an example of you. We can try to get revenge for what we perceive as attack on us. But to me, it also speaks to what I do, the power of symbols. I mean, those two symbols, I mean, obviously the swastika is a very potent symbol, and the mask is the perfect symbol for this age of fear-based mind control that we lived through in COVID. And I still see people walk around with these stupid masks on, driving their, I don't know if you see it in Germany, but there's still people driving in their car by themselves with this. I mean, they've been so, in a Pavlovian way, trained that these masks are somehow going to protect them. And it also, I think, there's part of it that they feel safer just because they're sort of disconnected from reality. They're protected, not just physically from a virus, but psychologically, like they can hide behind the mask. And there's a lot of really potent ideas being transmitted by that symbol of the mask. It's a symbol of that you belong to a certain group and a certain way of thinking. It's way beyond just protecting you from a virus, which it doesn't even do, but it's more symbolic. And this goes to the atavistic power of symbols, where they speak to us in a place that is beyond reason and rational thinking. It's an atavistic communication that precedes language. And like I say, that's what I deal with symbols. You deal with words, I deal with symbols, but the symbols are, in a Jungian way, are incredibly powerful means of communication. And that mask said, you're one of us. You belong to this cult. And I believe the whole thing was an initiation into a cult. And the mask was a symbol that you belong now. You're part of the new normal. And those of us who didn't were the heretics, were the outliers, were the bad people. And it's all our fault. And
if I could just jump in and interrupt you for a second, I think it's just funny because that's exactly what the two tweets that I sent out that started all of this were saying. I wrote them in German, obviously, but one tweet was saying the masks are conformity symbols, and that's all they are.
yeah.
And get used to wearing them or something. I forgot what I wrote. And the other one, I just repeated a quote by Karl Lauterbach, the health minister at the time. He was quoted in the media saying, the masks always send out a signal.
Yeah.
And so I retweeted him. I was like, yeah, that's the point of the masks, Carl. It's
also, think about it. It's also
theater.
A muzzle. It's also a muzzle, right? Which is like, what do they want to do with you? They want to shut you up, and they want to shut me up, and they shadow banned me and censored me and deleted me, and they wrote, the ADL wrote a hit piece about me saying that I'm a dangerous extremist because I believe that this was in March 2020. I said that they were going to mandate a vaccine. You weren't going to be able to work at your job unless you acquiesced. And they said I was crazy. That would never happen. And they put me on all these lists. But yeah, the mask is a symbolic muzzler. You shut the hell up. And you know it's a psyop if you're not allowed to question it. And I've never seen a bigger psyop in my life. But no, you picked the perfect symbol to represent that whole mass psychosis and top-down totalitarian flex.
I gotta jump in again before I forget. That when they were calling you crazy in March of 2020 for suggesting that there were going to be vaccine mandates and all this, it just reminds me. In March and April in 2020, I compiled a 257 tweet thread that was just basically it was all mainstream media headlines and stories. And I compiled it because it was really in those 6 weeks, 6, 7 weeks. This is when they rolled out the whole new normal program, everything, masks, vaccines, social distancing, lockdowns. They rolled it out all at once. And when you mentioned the story about when the ADL came after you, and called you crazy. Well, you weren't crazy. They publicized it. It was in several of those headlines that I compiled. The mainstream media was publishing this in March of 2020, saying probably the only way out of this is when it's vaccine mandates and everyone will have to take the vaccine and you won't be able to work. This was published in the mainstream media, and I documented it. So it's bizarre. The thing with the masks, I mean, yeah, I think it's fascinating, all of the different, connotations that one can draw from them. The main thing, the thing that I was focused on, because I'm, focused on power and totalitarianism and authoritarianism and so on. And the main thing that I was focused on is the masks immediately became ideological symbols, became political symbols, and it's exactly what you said, Anthony. These were the symbols that people wore, demonstrating that they were good party members. Yes, we're conforming with the new ideology that's being rolled out. I compared them to, again, people get sick of me talking about the Nazis, but it's the easiest and best comparison. They're like the little swastika pins that Nazi party members used to wear. I'm sure, for the conservatives out there, I'm sure the communists also had little pins that they wore. They were ideological symbols. It's funny, I got in trouble with the pro-Palestinian folks, the anti-Zionist crowd, when the first big protests, when Israel started liquidating Gaza and wiping everybody out, and the first big protests happened. Suddenly the media was full of pictures of mostly students on the campuses, Columbia and a number of other campuses, protesting, Israel's liquidation of Gaza. And all of the protesters were lined up wearing COVID masks, wearing
Yeah.
medical masks. And after a couple of days of this, I went on the social media and I said, well, what's with the COVID masks, people? Right? Protesters have been covering their faces, for decades. What's wrong with a $2 bandana that you could get at, Woolworths or something? Why is everyone now wearing the symbol of the new normal Reich? When they're protesting the liquidation of Gaza, and I got ripped apart, by the pro-Palestinian folks for that. But the point that I was trying to make is, these protesters are wearing this mask as if they mean nothing, and they don't mean nothing.
No.
They are political symbols. They are ideological symbols, and what they directly connect with is the authoritarian measures, this totalitarian, this pathologized totalitarianism that was rolled out during 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, we had protests at my school, FIT, and I noticed what you're talking about. And some of my students still wear masks to class to this day, because at such an impressionable age, they were, that formative time in a child's life, when you're supposed to be teaching them about resilience and about strength and they taught them the opposite. They taught them to be fearful and weak and comply to authority. And it broke them. And I think it broke a lot of them for a lifetime, psychologically, disordered them for a lifetime, and it's a crime against humanity. That alone, forget about all the damage from the adverse events of the vaccine, but that dog training, that beating them into submission and with fear-based mind control, just really, I see the fallout of it for these kids, and it just breaks my heart.
It's it's funny. I've been tracking this for a long time, long before the COVID thing happened, and I see it tied into this general trend that I find really disturbing. I saw something just randomly the other day, is what you reminded me of when you were talking, where people were having a debate. I don't know if it was in the New York Times or one of the big New York papers. People were having a debate about, is it child abuse to let your children go outside on their own? Right. I grew up, you did too, probably. I grew up in a time where, my mother would say, go out and play. It was the morning
Yeah.
and be back by dinner time.
Yeah, no tracking
You know,
device, or they didn't know where we were. I was up to all kinds
we,
of stuff. I don't know about you,
yeah,
but
we rode our bikes. We rode our bikes. This is in Miami and out on the edge of the Everglades. And, we rode our bikes down to the canal and chased animals around, and it got bitten by snakes. And it's it's one story. Just one quick story. One day I
sure.
was out there on my own without supervision, and I cut my foot pretty badly. And it's like, wow, okay, I'm bleeding like crazy. So I wrap my t-shirt around my foot and I ride home on my bike. I'm, just t-shirt is soaked with blood. I'm really bleeding profusely. And so I get back to the house and I come run up the front lawn, start pounding on the front door. My mother opens the door. I said, Mom, look, I cut my foot really bad and stuff. And she takes a beat and she looks at me and says, if you think you're bringing that foot in here on my carpet, you're out of your mind. Go around the backyard where the hose is. This is the world that I
Yeah.
grew up with, and now people are seriously talking about, is it abusive to let your children go out and play? The thing that's really sad about it, Anthony, is I'm laughing because I have to. I mean, that's the black humor is where I live, but it's the fear, the paranoia, just the fear of life and the fear of things that can happen to you. It's emotionally and psychologically crippling,
Well,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's just really sad to me.
yeah. I mean, Carl Jung said fear is a negation of God-given life force, and it's like, because if you're living in fear, you're not really living. So it's literally robbing you of your life, the thing that I believe God gave us, this animation of consciousness, and it's being robbed from us. And living in fear is not living. You're just trying not to die, which is not the same as living.
Which
And
which
it's,
is also kind of silly because, you're gonna die.
yeah,
We're
it's
all
gonna happen.
we're
Could be
all
tomorrow.
gonna this is I don't know, it's just bizarre to me. It's one of the first, big spiritual lessons that I learned is, hey, your worst fears are they're coming true. One day you're going to die. All right. So you might as well live in the meantime.
Yeah, and I mean fear. Well, they know that fear. Once you put some person in a state of fear, that they're no longer thinking rationally, right? It's because there's a threshold at which, if you have a certain amount of fear, rational arguments don't work anymore. Only emotional arguments work, and they know that. They meaning, what you call Globocap. Uh, Now, I know you try to understand the world and delineate it by the systematically understanding the systems that get that control it, and that you talk about an interesting way as almost like they're not getting orders, but the people who are in the system know what they're supposed to do, right?
Sure. Sure. It's funny because I have this discussion, this argument relatively often, and people tend to see it. It's either a conspiracy, it's either all coming from these individuals who are the bad individuals that we can go after, or it's a big systemic thing that has nothing to do with individuals. And of course, it's silly because it's both. I do
Well,
focus. I don't get very interested in the conspiracy theories myself and the individuals. I really focus on the systemic level. But systems don't run themselves. Systems are administrated by individuals. And I'm glad that other people are doing all of the concrete work of identifying those individuals and, documenting what they're doing and the damage that they've caused, because they're absolutely responsible for that. My focus is on the system is really just because I'm trying to, I'm hoping to, aside from just making people laugh, I'm hoping to maybe help people see the larger picture, to see why this is happening and see how the system that we're in is evolving and what it's evolving toward. I mean, this when I talk about the new normal Reich, or I talk about Globocap, which is really just a funny name that I stole from David Cross and Bob Odenkirk from Mr. Show. If anyone watching actually watched Mr. Show, it's a brilliant show. They had a little skit where there was an evil corporation that was called Globochem, I think. So I just stole that name. And Globochem had a little. It was a roly-poly, non-threatening, pansexual spokes thing, just this little creature that would pop up, every time and say, yeah, oh yes, Globochem is coming in to wipe out your entire society and poison all your children. But that's okay because Pig Pad loves you, and he would pop up. Anyway, I stole Globocap from Mr. Show. When I talk about, the new normal Reich, the title of the book, or Globocap, what I'm talking about, trying to paint a picture of what I believe is a new system that has never before existed in history. It hasn't been possible before. When the short version of it is, the Cold War ended about 30 years ago. And when it did, we became one big global capitalist world. We're in a one ideology world, and that ideology dominates the entire planet. And that system is evolving. It doesn't have any outside ideological adversaries anymore. Communism is defunct. I mean, people can still wear Che Guevara t-shirts and run around and call themselves communists, but it has no power.
yeah.
The system, yeah, it dominates the entire available territory. So it has nothing else to do other than consolidate its ideology and wipe out little pockets of internal resistance. In military terms, it's called clear and hold, right? And that, when I'm talking about Globocap, when I'm talking about the new normal Reich, what I'm talking about, I think, is this new system which dominates the entire planet and which is in its early evolutionary stages. And it's evolving naturally in a totalitarian trajectory, because what else is it going to do? It doesn't have any more enemies to fight. This is it's not an aberration. It's a natural evolutionary trajectory for this new system that we're in. When I talk about all the systemic stuff, that's the level that I'm trying to point at and get people to look at. It doesn't mean that the system is not being administrated by all the individuals who are actually administrating it. Yeah. My point is that those individuals are pretty much interchangeable and replaceable. What I always say is, you could take all those guys out tomorrow and shoot them, and they'd be replaced by other individuals who would perform exactly the same functions in the system.
Yeah, but that's all true. But we still, I mean, maybe if we really hold them accountable, then the next guy will be a little hesitant to get into that position. But
well, I'm not saying don't take them out and shoot them.
The guillotines don't sound like a bad idea anymore. But
Look, Anthony, I'm part Sicilian, so,
me too.
if you're talking, if you're talking about finding a guy who's responsible for hurting a lot of people, and and holding him to account for that, I go for it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
again,
another thing we have in common. But
yeah,
no, but the systemic way to me is so interesting to look at it because okay, I look at it as a spiritual dimension to this whole thing. I'd like your take on that because to me, this for whatever reason, this is a dark system. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's about squashing human liberty. It's about squashing free expression. It's about totalitarianism. It's about this herd mentality, and anyone who dissents from any part of it needs to be punished and ostracized. And look what they're doing to you, making an example of you. So, but the counterpart is if that's the dark, we're the light. We're shining light into those dark places, so people at least become aware of it. And then we all have our part, just like they have their part to play in this machinery as cogs of darkness. We have our part to play in light, like you write your brilliant essays, exposing in real time and helping people understand the systematic tyranny that's being unleashed upon them. And I do my part, and so many great researchers and writers and thinkers are doing their part to illuminate the darkness. So I think there's two systems at work here. And this is the animating contest of liberty, right? The eternal struggle between light and darkness and between freedom and slavery that never ends, and it's never going to end. So it's not going to be an end where everything's kumbaya and wonderful now. It's a fight that never ends, but we have to be engaged in that fight. It's incumbent upon us as people who can, for whatever reason, see these things and analyze these things and understand them, to play our part and to fight in this war for the soul of humanity.
yeah. We were talking about it the other day, and I think uh, the way I kind of look at it it's a little bit different, but it's the same. I don't honestly, just personally, I'm tired of waking up every day and feeling like I'm at war. I did it for 3 years. The COVID era was long in Germany. I did it for 3 years on a daily basis here. And then the prosecutions started, the investigations and the indictments started. And I just feel like I've been at war uh, for a long time, and I just can't, take it anymore. The other thing that's a little bit different is I do think that we're in dark times. I don't think that authoritarian forces, totalitarian forces, these dark forces, I don't think that they win. I don't think that. I think that what they want to achieve is first of all impossible. I think totalitarianism, in essence, is just this paranoid vision of trying to become God and control everything, which I think is just literally impossible in the first place. But I don't think these dark forces win. I think the life force, the spirit, the life spirit, goes on, and we go through phases. I think there are dark phases, though, dark times, and I think that we are in those dark times now. I personally, I don't think that we can stop the forward momentum, the trajectory of the evolution of this new, very dark system. And I make that distinction for a reason. I mean, we can dig into it if you want, but instead of trying to stop it or retard it, the way I see what we're doing, what you're doing with your beautiful art, what I'm trying to do with my writing, what a lot of people are doing with their reporting and just speaking out and just chasing things down and trying to, focus attention on things that a lot of people are doing. The way I see that is not really something that is going to stop the forward momentum of this system, but something that is weaving weaving the death of the system into it as it evolves, if that makes sense to people. Something, in the way that life forms, flowers, plants evolve, right, from seeds, and they grow towards their ultimate expression. And then that ultimate expression collapses and dies, and new seeds fall and new things are born. And I think that what we are, we are the part of that evolutionary process that eventually eats away at the dark totalitarian form that is growing. I think we eat away at it. We sort of weaken it and mess with it, and ultimately it reaches its final stage. But we've already altered it, on the way there, and then it collapses, and perhaps we're planting the seeds of what comes next. I don't know if that's too groovy and woo
No,
woo
no,
for people, but
no,
it's
not at
it's
all.
it's kind of the way that I see it, and I will make that distinction. I see it that way because I think that if we put our energy toward trying to stop it, trying to retard it, I think we're wasting that energy, because I don't think we can. And I think the system, the machine, loves it when that's where we direct our energy,
Yeah, no,
because it needs an opponent it can use us that way. I think we're much more effective when we are monkey wrenching it and eating away at it. And it's a lot of what your art does, Anthony. What all good art does. You see it, and your mind connects with it, and it does something to you that maybe you can't even really express completely, but it changes you, and it opens your eyes, and it makes you look at things differently. And that to me is where our power lies.
yeah, well, amen. And yeah, so Jung wrote about the answer to totalitarianism is it's like you're saying, it's not engaging it in battle. It wants that. It's to go inward. So totalitarian can take hold when people live in fear, and this fear-based mentality, they're much more easily controlled and liable to acquiesce their own personal power to a state, which takes the place of religion, right? The state is basically becoming just like the church used to be, and the state becomes your God. And there's a lot of that happening, like Fauci becomes part of the priest class, and they have their own scriptures, and they have their own commandments, thou shalt wear the mask, and thou shalt take the vaccine. So it's replacing the God-shaped hole with something different. And the answer is to embrace your individuality, and embrace and understand yourself. So you go the opposite, like you're saying. What they want is to go outward and engage them. You go inward and fix yourself, and try to understand yourself. Um, and he writes about it very eloquently, but he's getting to kind of the same conclusion that you're getting to. And I think it is incumbent upon artists. I mean, this is what we do, right? We're trying to get people to look at things from a different vantage point, a different perspective, because they're getting this sort of singular messaging from the establishment, and they're afraid. They're afraid to challenge it, because look what happened to you. I mean, it's like there's a big price to pay. I had to lie and say I had the vaccine, and I made fake passports. I had a little cottage industry making these for people, because I didn't have to do that stuff. And I wasn't about to do it, but I had to, you know, and that was another weird thing. Like they had all this high tech, system of this genetically modified vaccines and all this stuff, and then they give you this little piece of cardboard from 1972 to prove that you did it. It's like, what? So I just made fake ones because it was really easy to do.
Sure.
Like I used to make fake IDs when I was in high school for kids. It's like I was doing the same thing now as an old guy, which I thought was funny. But it's I don't know. I think certain people just have an instinct to fight it. And I don't know if I told you, but I I pitched your story to all of these different outlets that I knew in the mainstream media, because I worked in mainstream media for a long time,
Mm.
and especially in the design community, and the journalists that I knew in MSM. I thought they would love this story because this is a fellow compatriot. This is a journalist. This is an artist who's doing nothing but expressing himself and being, brutally punished for it. I thought they would champion your cause, but they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I it baffled me at first, but then I realized, like, oh, and I started questioning some of them. They thought you deserved it, and
Yeah.
they looked at it like you were calling them a Nazi. So they took the side of the bad guys, and that was a revelatory moment for me. Wow, these people, they don't care about free expression at all. I mean, it's not about whether you agree with you or not. It's your right to speak your mind and speak. That's what freedom of speech is. You have the right to speak. Everybody gets to speak, even if you don't agree with it. Otherwise, what's the point of free speech? If everybody agrees with the same thing, then you don't have to have free speech laws. So, um, I've been just so disenchanted and disheartened by what I saw from the artistic community, but I lost a lot of heroes, but I got a new one, and you're it, man. And you, like you said, you're tired of the fight. And you need to take a break. I mean, you've been on the front line. You got the battle scars to prove it. You've done your tour. It's time for you to go home and just rest a little bit and let the rest of us take up the
Well,
fight. Because
Anthony, what I mean by I'm tired of the fight is it's really more about adjusting my mindset. I like what Jung said about turning inward. I wrote a piece a long time ago. I don't know when it was. It was relatively popular, called I forget what it was, "Reclaiming Your Inner Fascist," or something. It's like your inner child stuff. Um, and it was connected to that. I think doing some internal work, but I think the external work has to continue. And part of the I've mentioned this before. Part of the reason that I have been fighting this legal battle for 4 years now is I feel like it's my responsibility as an artist. I could have just said in the very beginning, I could have said, yeah, I'm guilty, and paid the fine, and that probably would have been the end of it. But I feel like, I mean, the reason that I wrote the essays, the reason that I published the book, the reason that you know, that I went with your cover, all of this, of course it's provocative. Of course it was meant to provoke. And when I say we can't retard or we can't stop this evolution, that doesn't mean that I don't think that we should take the actions that we take. Part of the reason that I have fought this legal fight is I felt it was my responsibility to try to demonstrate to people what we are facing. Uh, because I think if people look at my case, look at the absurdity of my case, look at the relentlessness of the machine that is bearing down on dissent. I mean, forget about me personally. Uh, People need to see what the machine is. So much of its energy is directed at, glossing over what it actually is. It's like, oh, no, we're not, totalitarians or fascists or anything. We're just trying to save grandma, from the conspiracy theory, right? It presents itself as this, beneficent force. And I think it's incumbent upon us to take whatever opportunities exist to force it to show itself for what it is, so that more and more people can understand what it is that they are facing or what it is that they are aligned with. You talked about, trying to pitch the story to various media people that you knew, and they thought I was calling them Nazis. And I was. I was. I
they
was
didn't like that.
during the COVID years, I was calling everyone who was collaborating with the system, everyone who was, demonizing dissidents and, hounding us down and wanted us sent to the camps. I was over and over, I was telling them, you folks are acting just like Nazis. Yeah. That's what I was doing because I wanted them to hear that. I wanted them to hear that from someone like me. I
Yeah.
think part of the value of my case and part of the reason that I've been fighting it for so long is a lot of the criminalization of dissent, a lot of the repression and censorship has been directed at people who are, shall I say, sketchy. People over on the far right, people who it's easy to say, oh, this person is an anti Semite, this person is a Nazi, right? Well, I'm an old lefty who's been writing anti-authoritarian, literature for all of my life, who's married to a Jewish woman. So it makes it really hard, to paint me as some sort of, far right extremist. So it was an opportunity, and it has been an opportunity to demonstrate to people the nature of this machine that we're up against.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you're asking people, what do they really want you to believe in? And you're getting to the heart of it, which is like, I think people, there's almost a surface understanding of what's going on. And you're going deeper. You say, no, no, what do they really want you to believe? And really scrutinize that and look at it and see that, part of you knows none of this makes any sense. You have to. I mean, I have to believe they do, because otherwise it's like we're totally doomed. But
It does. It it,
oh,
it
I'm
does.
sorry.
Yeah, it does actually make sense, the message that they're sending out. And let me just stress, it's not just the Germans, folks. The new
No.
Trump administration is doing the same thing in the United States. Cracking down on dissent. Trying to imprison people, deport people because of things that they said or wrote in student newspapers. Um, you know, Rolling out the goon squads. It's the message that I've been tracking for quite a while now. The message that the machine, the system, the powers that be are sending out. It's a little bit complex, but it's not all that complex. The message is, oh, those democratic rights that you think you have, right? All of those rights. Well, you can still have those, you can still enjoy those, as long as you toe the line, yeah, and shut the fuck up and do what you were told. But if you step out of line and start creating a problem, we will turn those rights off in a heartbeat, and we will come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
That is
Right
the
or left.
message. Yeah, that is the message that is being sent over and over again. It's a message that, hey, this system is changing. Sure, we had to maintain this simulacrum of democracy and all of this during the Cold War because we didn't want you running over to the commies, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stay over here with us, here where everyone's free and there's freedom and you have democratic rights.
Yeah.
Well, okay, now the message is changing a little bit because you got nowhere to go. You can't run off to the commies anymore. So yeah, you can still have the simulacrum of democracy and all that nice stuff. Go to the mall and watch Netflix and stuff. But if you step out of line, or if you cause a problem for us, we are going to rain hell down on you, and your democratic rights mean nothing.
Yeah.
That's the message.
Well, this is another book cover I did for CJ, which I tried to encapsulate his tormentors and him facing his tormentors.
Beautiful piece of work.
And the ongoing saga is not over, right? Can you give us a brief update on your protracted legal battle?
Yeah. So in late October, I will go back. Well, I should back up. After my acquittal in my first indictment was overturned and I was summarily found guilty by the Superior Court, my lawyer and I, we appealed to the German Supreme Court, the Bundesverfassungsgericht. It's the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court exists to hear cases like this, cases that have to do with the Constitution and fundamental democratic rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all of this. We appealed to them. They sent us a notice recently saying, we're not going to issue a ruling on your case, and we're not going to explain why. We're not going to issue a ruling on your case. So basically, go fuck yourself. That is that's the end of that first prosecution. So I'm guilty of hate crimes for sending those tweets out. In late October, I will go back to the court where I was originally acquitted to be sentenced for the crime I didn't commit. Right? In the meantime, there is this new indictment. Now I have been indicted for publishing and distributing and promoting the book. Right? I pulled the book out of distribution because after the German Supreme Court issued its non-ruling, that was pretty much it. So my book is a crime. Your artwork is a crime in Germany. You're not allowed to display it according to the German law. So I had to pull our book, my first edition of the book, out of circulation, out of distribution worldwide, which I did. Luckily, amazingly, and bless them, Skyhorse Publishing is publishing a second edition of the book under its Tucker Carlson Books imprint. Of all things, it'll be out, I think, in October, right around the time that I'm being sentenced. But that, again, that's being published by Skyhorse in New York. So I'm not the publisher of it. I don't think the German authorities can come after me, but who knows? So anyway, there is this indictment. I've been indicted for publishing and distributing and promoting the first edition of the book, which is now no longer in distribution. And so we are waiting to hear, next steps in that. I'm assuming there'll be a trial, and I'll be found guilty of that. And the Germans have been threatening to hit me with really serious fines this time, which is pretty clearly they're angry that I haven't bowed down and kissed their feet, and so they're threatening to hit me with some serious fines this time.
Wow. Well, listen, when it comes to that, I hope to God it doesn't, but if it does, you're not alone, man. A lot of people love you and respect the fact that you're taking the bullets that they could have been for them or maybe coming for them, including people like me. So please reach out to me and I will organize a fundraiser because we got your back, man. And it's like, I know you're taking the bullets that, like I say, I could be getting. And I've been lucky enough. I mean, I've been censored and banned and everything else and shamed and ridiculed, but I haven't had anything close to what you've suffered. And I feel guilty because I'm a co-conspirator in your so-called crime. But, I wanted you to just talk a little bit about, how are you, like, through this whole ordeal and like physically and spiritually and psychologically, like, it's got to be brutal. And I don't want to understate just, what you've taken for us, the people who are on this side, and, just have respect for you for that.
Look, I really appreciate it, Anthony. Thank you for saying that. I just, I personally, I feel like, there's so many people in the world that are suffering much worse things than I have suffered. I try to keep that in perspective. I'm, my home is being raided, the police pounding on my door, I'm getting indicted, I'm getting dragged into court and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not being, physically tortured yet or anything.
Yet.
So, yeah, I just try to, I try to keep, my own struggles in perspective. And I just want to say, because you mentioned it, I just want to express my gratitude again. I'm so tired of asking people for money, and I've held off, and I will hold off until I really need it again. So many people have been so incredibly generous, donating to help with my legal expenses and all of that. And I'm just, so grateful, but more than I can express. So let me just say it. If any of you are listening, thank you. for that. I mean, you organized a fundraiser way back when it started. That has really been a lifesaver, and it really means a lot to me. I don't know what else. I kind of got lost in my gratitude there. Where were we?
Well, I asked how you are personally. I just
I,
we're praying for
I,
you, and
I'm okay. I'm okay. The I don't want to minimize it. The stress has been intense, and it's been unrelenting. And every time that I think it's over and I try to let go and move on, then they launch some new attack. So it's never ending. It's been really tough, and it's been really tough on my wife, which I really resent. And it's been a rough 6 years now. I ended up in the hospital earlier this year. I don't attribute my illness completely to the stress of all this, but it certainly didn't help.
no.
uh, I'm back on my feet now, through the major part of the recovery and trying to get stronger again. So I'm doing okay, but it'd be nice if the totalitarians would get off my back.
Yeah, that would be nice. Well, your sacrifices don't go unnoticed, and I want to thank you for your time and your struggles and your willingness to speak truth to power in an age of fear. You have truth and courage on your side, and a lot of people love you, man, and I'm one of them, and you're my hero, bro. So Godspeed. Thank you, CJ, and we will continue to unfold the saga of CJ.
And thanks so much. It's great to talk to you, man.
You too.
Okay,
Take care.
you too.